core session of the CDS series. I'm turning the recording on.
I just got it, Radek.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Also, for those who joined recently, I'm reposting the link to the Etherpad.
It's pinned, so it will appear there, even if it's if someone joined later.
Even better. Wasn't aware about this feature. Thanks, Ronan.
Welcome.
Okay, we have a bunch of topics. However, two very big things got covered separately. I mean here the Crimson as well as Bluester. Those meetings were yesterday. The links to paths are in the CDS general Etherpad. For the RADOS part, we have multiple things, with the most important one being EC optimizations. The driving factor is the desire to optimize the cost of storage, and making this more feasible by limiting the performance hit. There's an entire design doc made by Bill Scales, who is here, and to whom I'm going to pass the mic in a second to briefly cover the main ideas in the optimization field. For detailed description, please be aware that Bill has made a very good presentation. If my on one of the Ceph Perf weekly meetings 2 weeks ago, if my memory serves me right. I also linked the very detailed design document on GitHub. When it comes to the RADOS part, I added a bunch of topics that are mostly about the way how we want to keep the ability to deliver a release with stable EC basically at any moment. But before coming to that, let me pass the mic to Bill. Bill, would you mind covering the main ideas in the EC optimization field?
I don't think Bill's on the call.
I think I saw him.
I don't think I see him.
Sorry, he's invited. My bad. Okay, I don't think there is a big there is a good reason to duplicate what Bill has wrote. Then what's interesting for the further part of the discussion is that those optimizations, some of them would greatly benefit from changing the from increasing the chunk size. And that will be very interesting from the for the second topic in the discussion, the one about potentially compressing zeros. But just let me see, but just to skim over the EC, the delivery of EC optimizations. I was thinking how we could minimize the risk from coming that might very likely will come from opening the EC backend for modifications. I already encountered it when poking with the EC partial reads. It turned out that our test coverage was unsatisfactory. It got improved with the changes for the Ceph test RADOS program, but I'm afraid it's far from being enough. Yet, even if we decide that just testing is the solely way to preserve the ability to deliver Ceph OSD with stable EC support, the question will be how to recognize that the test that we are going to add is enough. I'm afraid that this might be very hard topic. Just the judgment whether what we are added recently is enough. So maybe we should also consider another ways of de-risking the big story of those easy optimizations. Typically, we were preserving already existing code paths while introducing a configurable to select between them. It's old story, it's old practice. It was applied even to the Bluster elastic shared blob optimization. It was applied to EC partial read. It actually did there pretty nicely, because one of the bugs, the one about multi-region reads, was able to be bypassed by just turning the optimization off. Yet, if you are going to make so many optimizations, this might not scale enough. I'm just speculating here. This will for sure require further discussion. But just thinking loudly, maybe something like a switch level up on the, let's say, EC backend interface, or maybe even yet higher with and if we need to have the granular, if we want to have granular per pool granularity, maybe some kind of fast EC pool type with the eventual convergence path will be a way to go. I don't know. I'm just speaking those ideas to throw on developers' heads and then ignite a brainstorm. That's one thing for the EC story. However, there is another one about switching the default EC plugin, there is existing PR. At the moment, we do the JRadar as the default thing. But it was pointed out about problems with supportability, about potential about real performance gain coming from switching to another plugin. The question is about backward compatibility. Any thoughts?
Radek, I think some of the performance gain that was in the original charts was due to running do CMake without the proper flags to ensure that we weren't getting debug builds. They did modify some of the charts in the one, at least in the one PR.
Okay, I was actually wondering about the size of the Ahmed's law, about the real the final gain from the point of view of entire OSD, because we know that the easy crunching isn't the the biggest bottleneck there.
Oh
But
yeah,
right.
there's that too. But even the gains that they're showcasing, I think at least some of it was due to just due to the do CMake issue. So we probably should circle back and even look at whether or not we expect just the J erasure to Intel's implementation. Whether or not that actually is beneficial. We might still want to change anyway, right? Because J erasure is not really maintained anymore.
Yes.
So it still might not be a bad idea, but it might not be for a performance gain. It might just be due to the fact that it's maybe the better long-term plan. Maybe. I can find the PR though. Let me give it 1 second. I can link it.
I'm not sure how deep we want to go into the details of every line in of our plans for Tentacle.
Well, when it comes to EC, I don't think that we want to get a deep dive, especially as there was such dive during the Ceph Ceph weekly call, and I think it got recorded. Am I right, Mark?
Sorry, Radek, what was?
The very good Bill's presentation during your call during the Perf Weekly. I think it got recorded. Am I correct?
Oh no, I don't believe it did actually. Unless someone is actually recording the Google ones by default, but I'm not sure that it did get recorded. Sorry.
Then whoops.
But you know what? He should have a recording from his presentation from Ceph Day London. It's the same presentation.
Of course, yes. Very good point. It was also presented during this meeting. Yeah.
So that there should be a recording of that talk somewhere.
If not, maybe we can redo during one of the further Perf meetings.
Yeah, it's totally separate topic, but actually, I think we need to get the performance meeting. We need to talk, I guess, to the Linux Foundation, whoever manages the recordings now, and get it worked out. I don't know if that's Corey. Is it the new person? Kisi says the new Linux Foundation person. Well, in any event.
I think Mark, we'll figure this out, because I think there's some meetings that are still getting recorded with Jitsi. Casey Bodley and Laura have had some luck doing those recordings, but it's still very far from being streamlined. So we can discuss that offline. But I guess so I guess the major thing that you want to highlight here, Radek, is that we have a set of improvements being planned. Now, how do we roll them out for Tentacle? options on the table
Yes.
are, is it going to be on by default? Is it going to be something like experimental, high performance EC setting, or what else? That's the major question, right?
Yes, we need to figure this out before we start really merging the stuff.
Yep.
Because we are fully aware that our test suits are simply not enough. They are not covering this region at a satisfactory level. So there is a risk associated with this story, and we need to minimize this risk. Okay, how about bringing this back perfectly?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, just so before switching to the next section, any other comments for EC optimization story?
Radek, I just a quick question for you. Do you have do you know what the timeline is to start working on the partial writes?
I think this winter. What I recalled, what I memorized, is that Bill's plans are pretty ambitious.
Yes, yes, that's a good description, I think. Okay. Are you still planning on continuing to do some of that work?
You mean whether I'm going to code to implement the partial read thing?
Partial write. Since
Sorry,
you
partial.
already
Sorry,
reduced.
partial
Yeah, yeah.
right thing.
Yeah.
No, I think it's on Bill's shoulders.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, if no more questions, I'm switching to the compression of zeros along the messenger, buffer list, and object store path. This is actually this is useful. It's not just for EC optimization story, but actually it's quite useful, especially if we are going to increase the chunk size, which is according to the documentation in our plans. We want to enlarge pretty significantly the chunk size. At the moment, it's 4K, and Bill is talking about something as large as 256 Ks. It makes a few optimizations, particularly those about exporting a major part of the work to clients. Very, very useful, very almost required because of waste, of potential of waste. Just to give a very simple example, try to imagine, try to visualize the waste associated with storing 1 byte if you are going with 4K and if you are going with a quarter of meg. A potential solution is to simply not convey those padded areas in as many places as possible. And we have actually some experience in the object store part and in buffer list of this path. For object store, some time ago, Laura was working on the zero deduplication in Bluester. Actually, performance, if I recall correctly, wasn't the driving goal. The idea was to extending the stability. Laura, would you cover quickly this story?
Yeah, so the type of work I did was in the blue store layers, and wherever we're writing zeros to the disk, we would skip that part. And the idea there was to use this feature more in a testability aspect. We had plans and still that we'd still like to implement about testing on large scale clusters in Teuthology. And while we've done testing like that on the on the Giba cluster, we wanted to be smarter about our resource usage when we do that in Teuthology. And the Blue Store zero block detection feature would allow us to simulate skipping writing so much data to the disks, especially if we're just writing zeros. At the time when it was first introduced, it wasn't tied to a configurable, and then we found issues with behavior when that was introduced, in especially with it was I believe thinning RBD images. So there's obviously unintended behavior in non-testing situations. And then I don't know if Adam Kupchak is on the call, but at the time we were also the original BZ. The scope was larger than what this feature was originally, or what this feature was able to accomplish. But there were several aspects about skipping zeros for compression that Adam was talking about that is not covered by the zero block detection feature. That's the context that I have. So essentially, there in the original BZ, where it would be implemented in real world clusters, there was more discussion and work to be done about how that would actually be implemented.
I see, but this the easy aspect of the story adds another potential benefit: performance. When it comes to Blue Store, when it comes to buffer list, actually, several years ago, I was working in this region. We already have API parts of the public interface for appending zeros. Literally, there is append zero method on buffer list, which I think fits this idea pretty nicely. Of course, there are obstacles to get some kind of special buffer pointer that would always and constantly point to a large block of zeros. All those obstacles are at the layer are driven by the same worry about crosstalks between buffer lists, between instances of buffer list. There is a possibility that if somebody adds a constant buffer pointer to a buffer list and let's say calls the char pointer, the non-const char pointer returning CSTR, it's able, he or she is able to poke with the buffer directly, corrupting and exposing changes also to other instance of buffer that just shared these pointers. Yet, this might be, I believe, addressed both at the implementation layer. I mean, here things like actually Bill already proposed and protecting the big buff of zeros. It's pretty obvious solution for Linux. I have no idea about Windows or other OSs, but I hope this should be fine. However, we I believe, should also tackle the problem at the interface of buffer list. I'm doing some feasibility studies right now, trying to find and fix usages of some problematic methods. Of course, the CSTR is in this family, but there are others. Get PTR, get current PTR, things like that. This is work in progress right now. However, the region that we lack experience with when it comes to zero compression is the messenger, is the networking part. I think we would need to change the encoding of buffer list. At the moment, we are doing a lot to not expose any internal details, any details of the internal structure of a particular buffer list instance. We are just then coding it as a net string. Length in the front, everything else flat data. This will need to change in a compatible way, of course, even for the in a way that actually would need to preserve tons of backward compatibility. It's not just about okay, it's not. Maybe it could be restricted just to OSDs, just to messages exchanged between OSDs, but there is also on the table going to clients, affecting clients as well for the benefit of extra performance. At the price, of course, of touching the kernel messenger. Any thoughts here?
Well, as far as patching the messengers on the client side, I think this, there might be some like this might be tying into the next topic somewhat on sparse reads. We already have an operation, so I would I suppose you could make an argument that a client, like if this was supported directly, then a client could also kind of exercise this zero compression on writes. But at least for reads, we already have the sparse read operation, which encodes a standard buffer list. But then alongside that buffer list sends an extent map, and the buffer list, if it's if it's 4K of data and then the rest is all zeros, then the buffer list will only have 4K, and that additional information is for sparse extents is relayed through that extent map. So perhaps instead of making the like changing how the buffer list is encoded, we could see if simply using sparse read would universally would get us most of the way there, unless you're also worried about compression on the right side here, which I would argue that if that's the case, then this behavior, this run length encoding effectively, it would need to be optional, because a client may want to send a buffer that is full of zeros and make those zeros fully allocated on disk. that needs to be, the possibility of doing that needs to be preserved throughout the stack, starting with the kernel messenger and all the way down to the object store. And this includes BlueStore. And if the client if the client like asks for that behavior, then it should override any sort of configuration options like the one that Laura talked about, which we needed to disable. Right, initially it wasn't even configurable, and we needed to introduce that configuration option and default it to false because that breaks real world use cases. So that would need to be preserved if we extend this to the right path as well.
I agree that yeah. First of all, right path is on the table, of course. I think that it might be simply enough to let to make this intentional, not intended for compression or however we are going to call it, just part of actual data. Because I think that that this would come, messenger will be made aware about what's something for compress 0, something and versus something not to compress, just by the structure of buffer list. So it moves the question, it moves the problem up in the stack. If a client of messenger would call append zeros, okay, this might go to the shared single shared buffer pointer of zeros. But I think it should be also a possibility at the layer of buffer list to put zeros into dedicated buffer. I think it's already okay. For right now, it's simply possible. Somebody can can use the buffer pointer, create it on its own, fill with zeros using append zeros, not on buffer list, but on this buffer pointer, and then push back to buffer list. That way, the messenger would not expose that, wouldn't treat those zeros as something for size reduction, for compression. Actually, it will be simply part of the data, preserving all the path, all the threads related to handling actual data across the stack, down the BlueStore.
Okay, at this point, I have a question. Is BlueStore expected to handle those zeros in buffer list somehow special, or it's all just intended to only compress on a messenger level and let BlueStore behave as if those zeros were just the same data as any other?
It's up to BlueStore, I believe. It's up to any object store implementation. I can imagine that those regions, making the optimization in all those 3 regions are decoupled in time. Let's say you don't need to go with BlueStore exactly the same moment as with buffer list, because if somebody reads buffer list while being unready, while not being ready while not understanding the fact what is compressible, it wouldn't be a big deal.
Okay, but the fact that we're talking about this means you really think we will be needing to pass a lot, or in some cases, a lot of zeros through Messenger. That's something, I guess, that hasn't been a case before.
Yes, I expect this coming from significantly increasing the chunk size.
Well,
but again,
so I know they want to increase the EC chunk size, but isn't that something that we can just do in the EC interfaces to like inflate them and then deflate them back down to the amount of actual data?
Yeah, we
Like
could,
I have
but
I have no idea how we could do an inline if there's this many zeros in the messenger, because bufferless doesn't have the same encoding versions and niceties as everything built on top of bufferless does. So this like the way this is being presented and like trying to make the messenger and BlueStore just notice it and do fake things sounds way harder than having the EC interfaces handle it.
well, I think Radek has essentially noticed the new encoding schema for buffer list line. It's line 30 in the pad. I think Radek is essentially talking about combining the like introducing an extent map into the buffer list encoding, and
something
then
like that.
having all clients understand that, which I think is probably kind of a step too far. But I, irrespective of how this gets implemented, whether the extent map is shipped kind of alongside the buffer list and then it can be ignored by clients that that don't understand it, or whether you actually change the buffer list encoding. I think
Okay, sorry. That's
the,
exactly what I'm talking about. The buffer list encoding is literally just here's the byte stream.
Yes, it's not
Like there's like this is like you would need new message types. You would need new messenger level, new protocol level, like send MSG tags that do different things. Like what I'm hearing sounds like a crazy amount of work. And I think you're saying like new encoding scheme and thinking like the way we do our other encoding, and that's not it. This is many levels deeper
So, Greg,
than any other thing we revised.
and I think you're missing like a lot.
Okay.
So while yes, we could introduce a different buffer type that only the EC types use, we still need to pass this down to the object store. So the object store would have to understand that part, because we really do want to pass the zeros, right? And we don't want to rehydrate a buffer list containing a bunch of zeros for no reason. We want to never hydrate them at all. So at least multiple components are going to need to understand this new type. And if it goes over the wire, yes, you could create an encoding that fakes the zeros, but you still need to handle the compatibility part. So the proposal basically is that buffer list itself gain this ability, and that when the message
but that's what I'm saying. Buffer, like, that's the part I'm saying is crazy. Is buffer list itself gaining this ability? If you want to not actually send zeros out over the wire,
what I'm saying is I don't think you've thought through the rest of it. It's not actually easier to do it somewhere else. It's actually quite a bit harder.
Plus, there are other, in the past, we were considering this as just optimization, regardless of the EC story, because it's useful even for other users. We have a lot of extra padding down in an entire project that would address them everywhere.
Yeah, if you do this as a different type, then everything that deals in buffer lists now would have to also deal in this new type. Everything.
Yes, but
no, I'm talking to Greg. Like this is my objection to Greg's point. Like every object store interface that returns a buffer list would also have to optionally return this other thing. So we need two overloads.
Well, sorry.
It's
this is what I was asking. Is like, does it need like what? Why?
Because we don't want the so let's say BlueStore. Let's say you perform a read in BlueStore, right? And a chunk of it is internally in BlueStore not represented for real. It's a special zero zone. So either everything now needs to be a sparse read type interface where it returns a map, or it returns like this new type we're trying to invent, or 3, it just returns a buffer list that does the right thing. So every interface that concurrently does reads and writes would have to work like that. The transaction would have to work like that too.
But why does BlueStore even need to know need to know about this amount of data? Like these zeros that never existed.
Because it might be an overwrite, Greg. So let's say there's a byte stream with a 4K header and a 4K footer and a meg of zeros in the middle. You're suggesting that we just don't write the meg of zeros? What if the object already has data there? Like, it's semantically different. It's not a no.
Okay, this is why I'm asking what the usefulness is for erasure coding optimizations. If we're talking about sorry, I maybe I missed something, but I didn't hear us talking about this because I assume this is for like chunks that aren't full size yet, but we need to inflate them.
That's
there
not
something
remotely the only case. Anytime you're performing an overwrite over like a big section of thing, there might be zeros. Like, it's a fairly general optimization.
Okay, but
There is a very good guys, we got dedicated methods for appending zeros to buffer list. I think it's not without a good reason. And it's
yeah,
not
but that
just
was
EC.
I actually don't remember
Okay,
optimizations, but there's a document with them. This wasn't just brought up here.
yeah, I understand that there's a document for wanting to do zeros. It's the part where we're trying to hide them in the messenger that I really don't think that I've not heard from anyone in this call that they understand what that means.
It
But
would
like
mean
I would like to hear a
differentially
discussion of how
buffer-
that's going to work.
It would mean differentially encoding buffer lists based on the connection features on the other side. That's what it would mean. Like, the messenger would change the way it performs the buffer list encoding depending on. Sure.
Yes. What do you think that means? That's what I'm saying. You're like, we use encoding in a lot of contexts, and I'm telling you that this is not like those, like any of the others. And it's not clear to me that anyone on the call understands that.
I guess I don't understand your question.
I guess, okay. So I think let's take this topic in a separate discussion, maybe at a performance meeting or some other forum. There are people who are waiting to get to their topics. So, and clearly we will spill. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have limited time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Anyway, we will need to back to this maybe on next Perf weekly. In short, in summary, I think it's feasible and it's doable and it's not crazy. Okay, let's switch to easy sparse reads. Actually, I think it glues nicely with this concept. Ilya, would you like to chime in?
Well, I think this was discussed yesterday in the Blue Store session, and since then I commented on Bill's PR, on Bill's design doc for EC stuff. And that got merged, but the comments were carried over into Trucker Ticket, which I pasted in the chat. I think everything that I would say here is there. So just in the interest of time, feel free to go over it, and we don't need to, we can move on to the next topic as far as I'm concerned.
Cool. Let's speed up a bit. Then coding enhancements. This is a continuation of the Squid effort. The reason, the original reason behind were bugs about our serialization schemas. We decided to improve coverage for changing in decoders and encoders. Nitsan has made tremendous work in this aspect. First of all, he introduced a lot of missed types to the the Ceph object corpus repo. We have tests that boil down to running decoder from current version and passing through it all the byte streams from all the versions that we archived in the object corpus repo. This ensures at least the compatibility between the future capability, at least between new decoder and old encoders. However, before switching to extending this even further, just a note: the PR from Nissan was so large that we had to cut it into a series of per component changes. Most of them got matched. However, PRs for TFFS and RBD got expired. We are going to resurrect them, as well as another PR Nissan has made. It was an optimization for the script making use of object corpus and encoder to run everything in parallel. This will be actually the continuation of what we already began in Squid. However, there is also other part. I mentioned that right now we are verifying old encoders. Basically, actually, precisely speaking, byte streams obtained from older encoders and passing them through new decoder. But I think we don't, or at least I'm unaware about, doing the opposite. I mean, using all decoders to verify compatibility with byte streams generated by new encoders. I've taken a look on the Quincy object purpose submodule, and I haven't found any update that would bring byte streams from, let's say, Reef or Squid. I was thinking for a while that we actually could add this extended testing pretty inexpensively, just by ensuring that the tautology that we run for release branches, for Quincy, for Reef. Nitsan, feel free to chime in.
Yes, Radik, actually we do have that since we are using the upgrade capability of tautology suites. So we are installing N-2 version and using that Ceph encoder to encode and decode Ceph corpus of master. So we actually do use the new encoders with the old encoders.
Okay, what N-2, right? What about clients?
And no, we don't have anything like that.
Maybe we should have.
Okay, we can plan something like that.
Yeah, but basically it will boil down into new tautology job, or maybe we could even try to reuse existing ones. What about what if the object corpus repo for older releases, for Reef, for Quincy, for Reef, for Squid, what if we were supplying new byte streams from, let's say, Tentacle to them? For sure, there will be the case of backward of a compatibility that got broken intentionally, but hopefully it will be rare / easy to tackle. How about that?
Yes, we can add that to the Ceph corpus and use the exist tests.
Yeah, that's about the technical side. What worries me is we will need also have some kind of political / social part of this effort, as that will need to become a rule that we need to constantly upgrade object corpus also in older releases, which is well error prone. We can simply forget. So maybe a dedicated purely technical solution is better. Anyway, just thinking cloudly, wanted to sketch this idea of further extending the encoding stability. If no questions here, I will simply quickly switch to the PG pool T. That was actually one of the drivers behind changing behind improving the stability. We need to get back to the change. There is already PR available. However, it basically does refactoring for the sake of potential future extension of PG pool T schema. Potential because, well, at the moment there is no need for such extension. I wonder whether it's beneficial to have to touch this without actual need for new schema. Maybe we could just merge the PR and if def, clearly signaling to any further developer in the future wanting to introduce changes that, well, we need that the PG pool encoding is broken, and here is code that needs to be turned on and well tested. Any questions? If not, then next thing is QoS. And we have a dedicated sub path for it. Sridhar, would you like to cover this?
Yes, sure. I can quickly cover US part. So to begin with, just covering the background as to what we have delivered so far. So the QoS for the OSD specific operations, they are now available in Upstream and Squid. So the OSD specific operations include the recovery, backfill, scrub, snap trim, and the PT dilution specific operations. So the whatever we want to cover on the OSD side, those have been covered so far. Coming to the upcoming things that we want to improve for Tentacle, one of the things that I'm thinking of is some additional refinements around recovery and backfill operations, because we've been hearing some feedback from customers relating to slow backfills after we made the change. So my intention is to dig a little bit deeper into this and see what more we can, controls and tunings that we can make, especially around recovery priorities, and also kind of provide better control for users to tweak them so that they can improve the backfill rates when they want to. Currently, with the existing clock profile, they are still not happy with the way the backfill rates are looking like. So my intention is to dig a little bit deeper and try to see what else can be improved here. Coming to the client QoS part, so the PR relating to this has been there. Most of the changes revolve around the RADOS APIs. Those are pretty much ready, and I had been testing this using RADOS bench extensively. And during the testing, I found that with multiple mClock queues on an OSD and with fine-grained specifications to reservation and limits, the client is not able to realize the set allocation. So some deeper investigations revealed that with multiple mClock queues, the tag calculations they end up not being accurate, and as a result, we are seeing the reservation or the limit specification by the client not being met. So I have made a small fix in the game clock code, in the submodule code, especially revolving around providing accurate tags when we have multiple mClock queues on an OSD, and the initial unit tests that I have written show promising results. So I hope to build on this, and changes will basically involve changes across both the mClock scheduler, OSD, and the submodule side. So that's one promising thing. Hopefully, I should be able to build on that, and that should provide us additional benefits, because it could have ramifications to the OSD side of operations as well, where users can now tinker with the QoS allocations using the custom profile. So that's where we are with client QoS. I have provided links to the existing PR, and also I have a design document. I'll make the changes to the document based on the work that I'm doing and then publish it. And I plan to test this specific feature using the Ceph CBT, using the RADOS benchmark. So that's on the card. And also as a stretch goal, I've taken up RBD clients as well at the image level, and hopefully, if I'm able to test this satisfactorily, then I can go ahead and work on the RBD side as well. So that's pretty much the quick summary of where things standing here.
Thank you, Sridhar.
No, I have a question. What does QoS at RBD image level? What does that refer to? If this is a client versus client QoS, if the same client is, so I guess I'm confused between like the entities that are involved here. If it's two images being driven by the same client, how?
So in the RBD case, I think we can allow RBD clients to specify QoS parameters either at the pool level or at the image level. But I haven't kind of really thought through these aspects. I'll try to provide clarity on this once I kind of dig a bit deeper into the details. But right now, basically what I think is specified QoS at the RBD header level. So a client, for example, can specify how much QoS it needs and that is basically transported via the RBD header, and then that is eventually sent to the mClock scheduler. That's the kind of level of detail that I know so far. I need to still work on that aspect a bit more.
Okay. I think just kind of the thing to keep in mind is if we are kind of talking about this in full generality, then the same client, the same LibRadis client can serve multiple RBD images. So, if those images have conflicting set of QoS settings, then that probably wouldn't work. But if it's if it's a single relationship, like it is in most for example, setups that involve QEMU, where there's going to be a single kind of Linux process with a single LibRadis client in it, serving most likely a single RBD image, then I suppose you could simply take the settings that are configured, by the user there, and simply kind of translate them into the settings that that LibRadis understands, and that should be relatively easy. So anyway, just some food for thought. I understand that this is just a in kind of a design stage and a stretch goal right now.
Right. Yeah. I'll probably reach out to you, Ilya, once I get to that stage to get some greater clarity around this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other question for the QoS part?
Not the QoS part, but in terms of the agenda, I know we are over time. Is it fine for folks to stay and finish the topics today, or do we want to split it up in a separate session and continue? Any strong opinions here?
I'm fine
happy to stay.
Okay, maybe let's use at least 25 more minutes. And if we still don't finish, we can break it up into a separate session and continue maybe on Monday with the telemetry session.
Sounds good.
Over to you, Radek.
Sounds good. Next thing is scrap. Ronan has the voice.
Okay, hi. I actually created a presentation today, but I don't think we have time for that. So I just go over what's here in the list. So we have basically 4 things that I wish to change, plan to change for Tentacle. The first is a very small one. It's splitting the scrub store where we hold the results during and after a scrub, split it into 2 separate entities, one for shallow errors and one for deep errors. The reason is that the way things are done today, we have a problem with starting a shallow scrub if we have a known deep error for the specific PG. And we are doing there is some logic around it, which creates its own problems, and I wish to remove it. Splitting the store is a very simple thing. It was, the work was started by someone. It might be up for grabs. I'm not sure yet. The main change is the finalization of what started 2 years ago, redesign scrub queue, replacing the OSD, replacing the implementation of the scrub queue maintained by each OSD. Instead of holding jobs or PGs, into holding targets that are a PG plus either shallow or scrub. It has multiple benefits. Again, I'm not going to go over the slides this time, but mostly it helps the operator or the user of the user controlling the cluster understand what is the schedule, what is in the plans for the next scrubs that are going to be performed in this cluster. And it's a great simplification of the code, which has a very complex part regarding the next scrub flags. So this is a major effort. It's halfway in. Some of it is now waiting for review. I hope I'll try to guarantee that it's done quickly in time. The other two are smaller. There was an issue of how to help the user, our client, to understand and control deep scrub scheduling. There is a problem there. There is a problem of having a frequently misunderstood and hard to control design. There is now an agreement of how to change this design. The implementation was already done, but not merged yet. It's waiting for the previous change. This will be part of, I'm pretty sure this will be part of Tentacle. And even smaller note, it's the fixing and clarifying and better documenting what types of scrubs are allowed to do what. For example, if a scrub is overdue, is it allowed to run in forbidden days of the week? That's not clear. And sometimes it should be fixed according to users' requests. There are multiple such details. Most of them are, of course, correct and implemented correctly. Some need clarifying and some need fixing, and all of them need better documentation. This is basically what I plan for this version.
Thank you, Ronen. Questions? If not, let me quickly go to the stretch mode. Actually, there is one single point, improving of warnings when it comes to the net split scenario.
Yeah, I'll just keep it quick. So while working on the 3AZ stuff, I think I had some discussion with Vikhad and Michael about potentially we could improve the user experience when they're experiencing net split. It doesn't have to be stretch mode exclusive, since what I'm thinking is that we can utilize the election strategy that we have for connectivity between the monitors. So we have the peer scores, basically a score of connectivity of its peers monitors. And what we can do is that, if we look at ourselves and as a monitor, and you can connect to all our peers, but you see that in the peer scores, there is, two monitors that are saying that they can't connect to each other, so they're both like not alive. We can say that, because we can connect to all the monitors, but we see that there is two monitors that can connect to each other. We can basically let the user know that there might be a net split between these two monitors who we assume are in different crush buckets, and the user will be more aware that there might be net split, and so you can do certain things, or so yeah, I think that's basically like the high level aspect of things. I'm currently working on a PR for that. Yep, that's it.
Thank you. If no questions, I'm switching to Ceph MGR. In Squid, we finally introduced the op tracking machinery to Ceph MGR. It was made in a way that doesn't require touching any Python module or laying down any interfaces between them and the core of MGR. At the price of limited scope, the price of limited resolution of such tracking, we had and still have the second phase of this effort, which will be providing modules with more granular tracking. However, currently, my view is that rather not right now, maybe not entirely, but it strongly depends of the audience, of the support engineers, whether it turns that whether lack of this extra granularity turns prohibitive, turns problematic, or hopefully no. So this will be actually question. There will be a question for more for people working more with the Python side of MGR, whether you need such interface, such facility for tracking.
So just to confirm from my understanding, the current kind of iteration of it, the first phase is simply an op tracker for the OSD requests or OSD ops that the manager itself is issuing, or?
No. It's settling down op tracker within Ceph MGR to track a request coming to it. And the key point was to track with the granularity to Python module, to be aware, to know where a particular operation and which particular operation got stuck, which module is the culprit.
Yeah, but can you give an example of an operation that is tracked by the op tracker right now in the current implementation? Like what gets, so like for the op tracker in the OSD, that's obviously like the OSD op message, right? That comes in, the op, like it starts being tracked, and then the OSD op proceeds through the various stages. That's what op tracker is recording. Can you give an example of, I'm just confused what the op means in this case. Can you give an example for the current implementation in the manager?
Okay, requests that are dispatched to modules.
From the Ceph manager command line?
For instance.
Okay, I see. Thanks.
Okay, next thing related to MGR. There is an old Trello card about tuning the MGR stats periods. It's basically the times, the period of reporting to MGRs. The problem is that in large clusters, MGR can be overwhelmed by requests, which, well, has some bad side effects, which glues us to the third point, being the dependency on Ceph MGR for retrieving the status of important things, let's say that way. I mean here even information about current statuses of PGs. This require MDR, and we know from the support perspective, this turns problematic if there is a module, or simply generally speaking, if MDR is unresponsive due to any reason, hang module, starvation, whatever. There is a huge problem, even with even basic operator side things like retrieving the statuses of PGs. I think we should at least improve documentation showing how MDR might be working on it, how to get those data, bypassing it, and if for cases it's impossible, maybe to add admin comments somewhere, particularly likely knows this. Questions, ideas? If not, I'm switching to the recently merged NVMe OF gateway monitor. It's one of the it's a Paxos service implementation. It's merged. It got merged recently. However, there is it's if deft at the moment. There is a cleanup taking place. Sam is working on that. However, the entire case has brought some questions. Also, generic one about the need for having Paxos services selectable at runtime. I added this this point, maybe even for simply excluding, for killing the idea. Is it worth the complexity? Patrick, I know that if you are there, I know you were pointing out problems related to handling this configurability.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I don't recall the exact arguments I had in favor or against it, but I do think it's a good idea. There have been cases where a Paxos service causes the monitors to crash, and in those cases, it would be very useful to turn them off, even if just temporarily, so that you can get the monitors back online. There's probably certain services we just simply cannot make configurable to turn off. This just wouldn't make sense, like the monitors, the monitor service or the OSD service. But many of the other ones are not essential for Ceph's core operations and probably should be possible to turn off. So again, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, I'm making I'm putting a note. Interesting, maybe not highest priority, but still worth doing.
Yeah, I mean, even just for CephFS, there was recently a case during an upgrade where the MDS monitor had issues, upgrades from, I think it was 18.2, no, it could have been 18. Was it 16.24 to 16.25? There was a decoding issue if a very old cluster, like pre-multi-FS, just had an MDS map in its monitor DB that had never been upgraded to a newer version because they just don't use CephFS. but then they upgraded and it caused the MDS monitor to assert and just brought down the monitors entirely. So like, even for those cases, it'd be really handy if the person who's in a panic to be able to just turn that off in a config on the monitor so that the MDS monitor is not instantiated at all, doesn't read that data and cause the entire monitor to come down. Maybe it even makes sense for the OSD monitor. I don't know. If you can get the monitors up, maybe there's a way to actually rescue them before you start the OSD monitor. So I mean, maybe we need to take a close look at all of them.
Well, maybe simply making an exception will be more complex than having the machinery generic.
Yeah, but then we also answer the question, like, how should Ceph behave if the OSD monitor is turned off? And I don't think we've ever considered that before.
Yeah, I think that was the worry. Initially we were trying to implement a runtime switch for the NVO OF monitor gateway. The problem, I believe, was exactly the lack of good response. What would happen if somebody turns this setting on, let's say, one of many monitors?
You mean like one of the monitors instead of all of them?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd want to do it that way. You'd want to have it as a setting in the monitor map. And for that reason, I think the monitor service has to be cannot be turned off. Otherwise, how can you can't even form quorum?
Yeah, just a Ceph config subsystem doesn't make sense here.
But then the difficulty is like you have the monitor map in the DB. I guess we could have like a command to if the monitors are off, you could modify the mon map directly.
Yeah, we have the mon map.
So that would probably be something that's set when the monitors are all offline. That would, but you'd still want to. So how would you handle upgrades? Because you want to be able, let's say you want. I'm thinking out loud. I guess NVMe over Fabric would be like an example of something that's turned off by default, and you have to turn it on in the mon map.
I see. Might be worth.
Yeah, I think we need to have a list of enabled services or something.
Yep, sounds pretty useful, especially as we were worried about NVONF. Okay. Also, there was an idea to move it out entirely from monitor and implement on top of the watch notify machinery. What's the status here?
There's no status. We have a lot of work to do before we get to that point.
Understood. If no more questions, switching to the app map.
Well, I just want to say, I think there is a desire to keep the monitors extremely simple, stable for obvious reasons, but this is not necessarily a bad use case for monitors to have a NVMe over Fabric gateway service. There will be others, and if there's stability issues, we should try to address that, even if it's just through exception handling where possible, so that it doesn't bring down the entire monitor.
I see. Having the access service list configurable lowers our worries, lowers the need to have to move out from a monitor, particularly move out the NVMF
So from a strategy point of view, I pretty strongly disagree. And the reason is, well, there are a couple of specific reasons. One of them is that, yeah, the monitor is more sensitive. No one else can make progress if the monitor crashes. Yes, we could mitigate this with exception handling, but there's no replacement for it simply not being there. But the bigger reason is scale. We expect there to be a lot of NVMe-OF gateways, something like proportional to the number of OSDs or the number of clients. So while it's the case that right now it's limited to a pretty small number, that's mainly because there aren't very many users yet. Once it scales, this is going to become an issue. It'll be something like the amount of load that the set of all OSDs imposes on the monitor. So doing it in RADOS instead, despite, you know, an open-ended amount of complexity associated with that, would mean being able to distribute the work across a lot of OSDs. For instance, the current implementation only actually cares about atomic state updates within an NVMe-OF gateway group. And there should be many such groups, each of which could be partitioned to its own RADOS object. And I think this is going to be true for a lot of such users. Making the monitor scale is very, very hard, but making RADOS scale is comparatively easy. Now, to the other point, Watch Notify is bloody difficult to use. It's difficult to reason about, and it doesn't have an obvious place to put something like a primary monitor. So when we seriously discuss this, it will be in the context of creating a library that gives us a Paxos service-like interface that people can implement and get basically fire and forget behavior from the OSDs. I don't think we should expect people to use Watch Notify raw. But I do think it's worth giving them the ability to do that. Does that make sense to you, Patrick? At least as an aspiration, if not necessarily a concrete goal.
Yeah, I mean, as an aspiration, sure. I think that the technical requirements will guide the implementation, and I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be built on Watch Notify if we're going to be building some kind of Paxos library from scratch on RADOS.
Well, we don't need a Paxos library. All we need is the ability. So what the current
Something that's
implementation
acting as
gets,
Paxos.
but in other words, the RADOS protocol's commit protocol is already enough. That's not really the issue. What the current implementation gets from the monitor isn't atomic updates. We could get that anywhere. It's somewhere to put timers. That's what's missing. Like they need the ability to do heartbeats and failover. You can do that on Watch Notify, but it's not easy. So giving people a library that makes that straightforward on top of, if not Watch Notify, then some other mechanism embedded in RADOS, would I think be the safer, more tractable long-term goal. Also, Radek, it's not the case that safety isn't the issue. It's just that performance is another issue. Solving the safety issue would be insufficient on its own, I claim.
Sam, would you envision this as some kind of RADOS class that implements this?
Maybe. I'm not sure. It depends on. So there are several different strategies you could use to employ to do this. You could make it so with the NVMe-OF gateway, there's like several services that are running that are long term. So we could use Watch Notify to essentially elect a leader among them and have them do the state maintenance. We could still hide that under a library, but from an architectural standpoint, we wouldn't need the OSD to do that part. If, on the other hand, we expected there to be short-lived users where we don't really want to stash state in their memory, then yeah, plausibly, we might want to allow Watch Notify to do some more stateful stuff. Specifically, the ability to trigger a notify or trigger a state update upon watch expiration. That's the missing piece, I think. That would allow you to do something like a heartbeat failure. So I think it's an open design space. There are a few things we could do, depending on. I think I'd want a second user.
Can't you implement that with locks? Because that's what we're doing with Ceph SQLite.
Yes, for example, like you could implement a lease mechanism on top of Watch Notify as it exists today.
I don't think we're using Watch Notify for that. It's just the lock class.
The only
you can set a timeout on the lock for it to expire, and then anyone else who's trying to acquire it would be able to acquire it then.
The only thing Watch Notify buys you there is the ability to not pull. So you'd get a notify when one of these things fails or clears. So if you're waiting,
I don't think we're pulling.
I don't know what the lock class does internally, but you'd have to be. So let's say two things try to lock, you need something to notify the one that's waiting. Or it could just get failure.
The OSD just sits on the operation, if I recall correctly.
until the lock clears? I don't think so. I think you get a failure.
I'll have to double check, but I thought that's how it works from my memory.
CLS lack returns a ebusy error if the lack
Yeah,
is
that's
already
right.
acquired.
You have to pull. The library probably does that for you, but
Yeah, I think that's what I did. My memory is faulty.
which is perfectly fine. If you don't care about the latency, then that's perfectly reasonable. Or if you're willing to busy pull at a really low latency. So, like I said, it's not so much about watch notify. It's about coming up with a good, solid interface that people can easily implement that doesn't require reasoning too closely about this stuff. I think that's what we got out of Paxos service here. It is actually a pretty convenient interface to implement. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Obviously, a lot more work needs to go into this in the future, and we need to actually fix the current implementation before that becomes relevant anyway, because we'll have to support it for a while, regardless.
Thank you. I'm switching to UpMap balancer. There is a single point there, improving, making it more scalable with multi-threading.
Yeah, I can briefly talk about that one because I know we're pretty much out of time here. So there was a card in our backlog about balancer multi-threading for the UpMap balancer. And I took a look into that recently and saw, after working with Sam, we identified there was a function that's called within the function that is specifically used by the UpMap balancer. That is a good candidate for multi-threading. It's a function that where we're performing that action on PG sequentially, and in a very large cluster, this could cause performance bottleneck. So at this time, the idea is very much in the design stage, but after evaluating the issue, I think it's something that could be included in Tentacle. So I will be looking at this, and really the goal would just be to take the performance bottleneck that's going on in the UpMap balancer function and make it so that it's more scalable in large clusters with many, many PGs.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, then there is also the mon config profiles. Matan, a few sentences, maybe?
Even one.
Even
yeah,
better.
so we have this idea brought up initially by Sage a while ago, and the idea there is to provide a config profile, just as the title says. The initial PR was closed, but I did some groundwork there, some refactoring. And now we're ready for actually implementing this, and this is a future goal for T release. I guess that will do for the time we have.
Thank you, Matan. The next item is the nonce randomization in Cephmon. Actually, lack of it. The problem popped up in the field. It turned out that our monitor that got redeployed with the same IP address, the same part, was unable to be accepted in the quorum. The reason was that leader had stale but existing connection to it. And I think it's pretty similar symptom to what we saw within OSD with OSDs in containerized environments. The problem, well, monitors always go with 0s nonce because, well, that's how it. That's because the addresses in Ceph are checked. So clients cannot be easily made aware what's the random nonce of current monitor instance. There must be some kind of predefined value. 0 is what we are putting in MomLab. I was thinking on how to tackle the problem, and user space messengers turned out to be richer. In user space messengers, it turned out to be richer possible. Why do we care about monitors nonce? Because internals of Messenger care. Even there is even a bunch of comments where this expectation is clearly expressed. In this particular case, it was an attempt. To reuse existing connection, and across when doing that, there is the sequential number for connections.
Oh, so a monitor rebooted and someone didn't detect that it was rebooted? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's painful. But well, I made a hack that works for user space messengers, even preserving backward compatibility. The problem is in in the kernel messenger. The difference is how the Ceph ADDR vectors are parsed. My idea was to introduce some kind of nonce wildcard with the same address type as non-zero, as non-zero address, as addresses with non-zero nonces would be appended to address vectors. The problem is that kernel messenger simply rejects such vectors, if I recall correctly, with invalid. So maybe another approach would be to multiply the number of messengers, messenger instances, use different for clients, use different for communication between the quorum, between the monitor subcluster, but it's also problematic. So I wonder whether we could tackle the decoding of kernel messenger, but I am fully aware this is how latency would look like in this case, latency propagation of this ability. So Ilya, maybe question: is there any way to discriminate, to recognize whether a monitor deals with kernel client?
I don't think so, because it's you would need, presumably you would need to do that, like you want to do that in the messenger, right? So it's very early on, after it's just exchanged a few frames. So I think this rejection happens after the authentication, somewhere where the server ident and client ident frames are exchanged.
Yes.
So that's very early on, and I don't think the kernel client looks any different at that point from a user space client. I'm not sure. You mentioned that you've come up with a hack for for handling this in user space, and it's even backwards compatible. But I think it's really, the semantics of the protocol, if I recall correctly, is that we need to, check. So the fact that we were able to come up with such a hack probably just means that the user space messenger is slightly lenient in the way it does those checks.
And this is the point I would disagree about. I would argue that actually messenger actually okay. I think first of all we are talking about different checks. Yes, there is the cross check on client ident and server ident, and the addresses must be more or less equal. More or less is because of the clients connecting with monhosts, etc., where there is no place for all the details our address class contains. However, the problem with kernel messenger is different. In user space, you are perfectly allowed to have a address vector consisted of multiple addresses of the same type, like two addresses of the V2. And I was exploiting this possibility. In kernel, is strictly disapproved. Whenever it even happens on the decoding of Ceph ADDR vec-t, when the kernel messenger checks for duplicates of the type.
Yeah. I guess I just didn't see a use case for having a vector, because a vector, the only reason we have a vector is to accommodate the different types. So the use case is really having like a V1 address and a V2 address, and I guess I just didn't see a use case for two V2 addresses when I was coding that up. And I would argue that's I would stand by that assertion or by that assumption actually. So
Radek, is this written down somewhere? Like, do you have a PR or a ticket or something?
Yeah, I have
like the details are going to be very, very finicky.
Yes, I have a commit with this idea. Basically, I was just appending for monitor. I was appending two addresses of the same type. One with properly randomized nonce. It was area in the vector. Second one for the compatibility of the client and the server checks. I also placed an address with 0 nonce just for compatibility, and it was working with protocol V2 in user space. Anyway, let's maybe not waste. Let's not spend more time on this. It looks some discussion between on the topic of kernel user space will need to happen.
Yeah, well, regardless of those implementation details, I'm not sure we have actually established that. I mean, we've survived without non-randomization in Ceph-mon for what, like 15 years? So I'm not like I think in the PR that you've opened for that initially, you mentioned that this was a customer case, and then here you mentioned that and like I didn't quite get, so like the Ceph-mon was redeployed with the same address and port, and then something got stuck, or like I'm not even sure what broke. So that's.
I see. Yeah, I will. Okay, maybe not in the PR. I will send you a link to the BZ.
And then, that's fine, but just I want to, I think what this meeting is, is good for is to establish whether it's something that we should even care about. Like, are people supposed to, like, or do we allow people to redeploy monitors with the same port?
That's a very good question.
If not, then why bother with any of this, right? So
yeah, this would actually, it's broader, and then just deployment is a new restart of monitor. The thing that could make the case very special was that the global sequence ID for connection was extremely high on the leader, and finally the redeployed monitor, the restarted monitor, will finally would catch up, but in this case, it will take half a year. Because on every attempt, we are increasing the global CQID, and that's, I think, the reason why ultimately those monitors are joining the cluster. But in some cases, it can take a while. And I think
I just don't understand what the actual problem is here. Is this like clients reconnecting? You're talking about monitors can't join the monitor cluster? That can't be caused by this, because this works all the time. Like, we reboot monitors constantly, and they're fine.
The question is, how big is the difference between? Okay, first of all, whether there was no timeout on the connection object at leader, which is also surprising, because I would assume that those existing but stale connections are finally re-upped. But it would also never happen if okay, never, according to apart of the nonce collision, which is unlikely. If we had the randomized nonce randomization in place. But I also agree that the fact we survived so many years, I was shocking. It dates back at least 2012, and I think it's far longer. Sorry, far older.
Yeah, I mean, it's the monitors have a zero nonce because they need to be well-known addresses.
Of course.
So that's why I'm asking, like, what the actual problem is here, because like this PR says monitors can't join the cluster, so it's the monitor to monitor connections which are broken, and like.
Yes, it was a monitor, redeployed monitor was unable to join.
Sorry, redeployed. You mean a newly created monitor on the same IP
and address? Yes.
Well, that's just not allowed. So what?
I mean,
like, because you've also mentioned
is,
you've also mentioned monitors being restarted, and the restarts should be taken care of by the global sequence thing in the messenger. Maybe that's not, maybe there is a bug there or something, but or you mentioned that something did not get timed out, so maybe that's in play. But the restarts, I think we should separate kind of just the daemon getting restarted, because it got killed by something or whatever. We need to separate that scenario from the scenario where like a fresh monitor got redeployed on the same address and port, because that's not what you're supposed to do.
Okay, and that's very useful point. Thank you. I was simply unaware that this is that reusing address IP pair is prohibited.
I mean, I don't know that it's prohibited. It's just like, I'm suspecting this is a very, very narrow combination of circumstances which have easy steps you can take to avoid it. Like, take out the monitor and then re-add it once you've deployed it into the map should resolve this. And like, I can't imagine how you can redeploy a monitor on the same IP and still have old connections sitting around. So like,
no.
This makes me think
no. There is a misunderstanding. The monitor that was unable to join was redeployed. The redeployed one.
Yeah.
It was unable to join because it was rejected by monitor leader, other monitor that had the object for representing connection, and it was this connection was actually stale, but yet existing. That's the reason. And having random nonce simply prohibits obtaining this connection from the lookup table.
So
yeah, sorry. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't like I believe you that the object was still in memory, but
well, there are logs.
But I suspect that under normal circumstances that won't happen because it'll get the hang up from the monitor going away. So like, this was probably weird networking or something, and like, can you rely on it? Maybe not, but this doesn't seem like a thing we should be trying to change our protocol for if it's happened once in a like manual intervention into the cluster.
Yet we still have a bunch of comments expressing the intention of having nonce unique.
Right. But the monitors are special. Like nonces need to be unique for everything else because you need to detect restarts. But monitors are special because you need a well-known address to speak to them on and know who they are.
Yeah. Yet those comments those comments don't make this exception. So we should update at least them.
I mean, sure, sure, but I'm pretty certain that's just that's why.
Okay, I'm also fine with
like the monitors have other
holding
mechanisms to deal with the problem that the nonce is dealing with, like these other sequences that Ilya is referring to.
Yeah, and they are working in this situation, and I think after I made some assumption like number of retries per second. It was around 6 months when the leader would allow the redeployed one to join. But well, this dumb workaround is simply to restart the leader. As simple as that.
Well, and maybe to look into time out these connection structures in whatever lookup table. Maybe see if there is something broken with regards to timing those out, because if that's it's supposed, even though the redeployed monitor is connecting on the same address and port, it's a different socket. So like something somewhere did not trigger.
Yeah,
like,
maybe
there was an event that got missed that should have caused an eviction from that table. So either this monitor was redeployed so fast that it just couldn't time out. It just wasn't given a chance to time out, or some kind of notification got missed. So either way, this seems like an isolated incident to me, and I think like bothering with, like, I'm open to talking about potentially patching the kernel client here, but it just doesn't seem to be worth it.
Fine with that. Okay, this leads us to the very last item on the plate, which is the required min-compat client. It's actually an ASAC command and a mechanism for operators to, and here is this agreement. Our documentation, even on the layer of the RADOS API, says for prohibiting uncompliant clients to connect. And we expressed this idea also in the documentation of the balancer. However, a recent bug in handling the UpMap primary unveiled that this is not what's happening. There is no enforcement of this version set by operator on daemons. While we already have a junction point between the required features of OSD map and messenger in all the daemons. It allows to prohibit joining. it allows to reject clients that are not using that are in compliance with the feature, but only if the feature is actually used. I put a link to the comment where I'm explaining the difference between the intention to use a feature, like let's say AppMap primary, like let's say MSR, or even older crash related extensions, with actually using it. Intention and using are two different things, and I worry how we could handle the situation. Because, well, at least our documentation requires changes. At least I'm worried that there was I was discussing with Ilya what was the original intention between the required Incompat client. My current stance is that even if the original intention was to don't have this enforcement in place, even if that's the case, well, the entire feature enforcement, feature validation machinery would be incomplete, would require implementing a bunch of extra pieces of machinery, like let's say eviction of existing but uncompliant clients, where the enforcement would be far simpler, where the current junction point between features and messenger would be enough. But there is a nasty case that demonstrates the difference between intention and between intended and actual. It's the AppMap balancer, even the old one, the one about AppMap items we have since Luminous, if I remember correctly. Try to imagine a situation where your distribution is perfect. That situation that doesn't require any presence any of AppMap items in the container. In such situation, OSD map stops requiring clients from having the compatibility, having the corresponding feature bits. And I'm afraid this is just an instance of broader problem that affects even MSR and even older crash extensions. Okay, not to such extent like with the balancer, but it's still problematic. I would love to consider introducing the enforcement of required Incompat client. Yet I'm not sure whether we could reuse the existing comment, the existing syntax. Thoughts?
Well, I guess since since I was kind of involved in that discussion, it turns out I have that PR, with the link to that comment, to the lengthy comment. I actually had it open in one of my tabs, but I've been meaning to reply, but it just somehow slipped. So the original intention was definitely no enforcement, and that's evident even from the command itself. That command accepts a -- force flag, which allows, which basically overrides the check that it performs for which clients are connected at this point. So even just the fact that there was provision for overriding the check, kind of tells that it wasn't intended to be like an actual enforcement, because Otherwise, like you override the check and you somehow you enable the feature bit over the incompatible clients that are connected. That doesn't make sense. Then the second point is that you mentioned that we already have a junction point, right? And we wouldn't need to worry about evicting clients, or there would never be a case where, we proceed with attempting to, where we get into a conflict where there is a client that is incompatible and then the feature bit is somehow enabled. I'm not sure that's actually true, because the check that is performed on, on the connected clients, it's not atomic with publishing the new
Yes,
DMAP.
yes, I fully agree. I'm aware about that. My point is that it simply lowers the chances to being negligible.
Yes, it does lower it, but still, in terms of kind of solving that problem where you can still end up with an incompatible client connected to the cluster, that does not solve it, because it's not atomic. The third point is, as far as if we want to introduce the enforcement, if people think it's a good idea, then I would like to point out that tying clients, or in particular the kernel client, to the code names, or release code names on the user space side, so things like reef, squid, whatever, that does not work. It hasn't been a problem in recent years, because we didn't have a lot of new RADOS features, or a lot of new RADOS features that were incompatible with existing clients. But had this been enforced the way you envision it to be enforced, and based on user space releases, this would have delayed the adoption of the original PG upmap, not the read part of it, but the original the original one that arrived in Luminous. That would have delayed the adoption of that feature by a year, 2, maybe even 3 years, because of how the kernel client implemented only some of the Luminous feature bits. So I think this part of the problem here is that we've run out of feature bits, and we've started cramming multiple features into the same feature bit, and then Sage came up with this horribly complicated scheme for reusing feature bits that I don't think many people understand. Taking this kind of one step further, and then insisting on it, and basically encoding in the CLI, not just somewhere internally, but basically in the CLI, in the interface that we expose to users, promising that we would have that there's going to be something that has a code name. Let's say it's reef, and then it corresponds to a feature bit. And if the client doesn't implement everything that falls under the feature bit, that client is completely excluded. That's that's a problem. And to go back to my example with PG upmap, we were able to get by, and users were able to take advantage of PG upmap as soon as it showed up in the kernel client, without everything else. And that everything else, by the way, was the address, was the message, the changes to the address vector in the messenger, because that landed in, I believe, Kraken in anticipation of Messenger v2. So Sage introduced the the vector to in anticipation of introducing different versions of the same address. But Messenger 2 did not land until Nautilus, and so for 3 or 4 user space releases, we had this feature bit, which ended up being, due to the there are other details involved there, but we had this feature bit that the kernel client did not need and therefore did not implement. But it ended up being tied with this, in the Luminous release mask, because the Luminous release mask includes not just Luminous feature bits, but also the feature bits of all the releases that come before it. And had this been enforced, this would have been a problem. So
I see.
if you want to add the sort of enforcement that you were talking about here, I mean that's fine, because this just moves the enforcement point, I guess, or the junction point as you call it. But my belief is that it should not be tied to release masks, but it should be tied to individual features. So in this case, the command should be, require mean compat client, e.g. upmap read balancer or something like that. So I would encourage you to, like, if you start working on this, to kind of take it in that direction and walk away from the release masks as much as possible.
Maybe at least with, as your point about the kernel lock, I see that the factors that drive this. Maybe we should have simply a way to something like because using the release names is imperfect are handy for operators, but this handiness comes with the penalty for kernel clients.
Not just kernel clients. It also, like, as soon as you backport something, or as soon as you bring something downstream ahead of upstream in terms of the backport release, this just breaks down completely. It's not just because the kernel client is special and we try to keep it as minimal as possible. It's also, you can have a squid-based, code base where a feature is present, and a squid-based code base where a feature is not present, and both identified as squid on the command line.
I see.
Which is why, first of all, I think it was a mistake that we've started kind of cramming the feature bits together. We should have just did something in the messenger, like grab the protocol there and introduced like a flexible, bit vector that could go to whatever hundreds of feature bits if needed. But that ship has sailed. So at the very least, we should, for the, like in this case, because the reef code name corresponds to server reef feature bit, that's fine because there's only one feature bit. But in the past, we had, for example, the Luminous code name corresponded to more than one feature bit, right? And also the feature bits of releases that come before it. That's where it strikes on the kernel client side.
Yeah.
I just
want to flag here. They're called like server Nautilus and server Luminous because they were supposed to be the server features that we knew would go together. Client server protocols.
But then people again, because these feature bits are kind of so complicated, and people got the message that we don't want new feature bits, but then forgot about the distinction between clients and servers. We have more than one feature. It's not just, so for example, for Squid, the crush MSR stuff is also tied to server Squid. Or I'm sorry, no, for MSR I think there is a separate feature bit, but for for the balancer, it's tied to server reef. And I think there was one more example in one of the previous releases where a client-side feature is tied to also to the server-side mask. And yeah, Sam, I corrected myself. I just recalled that it's a separate feature bit. So I think at the very least, again, just no matter what, if you do any sort of enforcement there, walk away from code names and introduce names for individual features, and then map those features to whatever feature bits, even if it ends up being one of these server mask feature bits. Do that mapping internally so that it's something that can be adjusted when backporting and is not exposed to users.
Making a short note on that.
And then if you do that, perhaps, with that in mind, this require min compat client thing is, this becomes, nothing more than just a check on which clients are connected at this particular moment in time, which isn't atomic, as we've discussed, with the actual feature getting enabled.
No, it's not.
So you can actually keep it as is, or maybe just deprecate it entirely, I don't know, and introduce like a new like command which would allow like setting feature bits on demand instead of having the feature bit be set kind of internally. And then the balancer, to go to this, to go to the example that you've presented with the upmap read balancer, or even the original write, or the original kind of PG.
Yeah, the one that uses
balancer.
items.
Yeah, where it's, if nothing needs to be balanced, even though the balancer is enabled, no feature bits are marked as required because there are no entries in the PG upmap table in the OSD map. If we add such a command that explicitly sets the feature bits, sets a certain feature bit, makes it required, then the balancer could just run that command when it's enabled, as opposed to when it needs to install something to the OSD map exception table, when it needs to add an entry there. And then the feature would be enabled at the time the balancer is turned on, and disabled at the time it's turned off. That would close the the current the scenario that you brought up.
Yeah, it will be basically something like a min required compat clients, but with far more sophisticated, more proper handling of what's required actually.
Yeah, and without the option to override the check on the connected clients.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds good. My point here is that okay, this is nothing new. We were living with this for years, so also I personally perceive this as important. Severity is important, but priority is far from being urgent. Okay, we are settled with this. Okay, there is one very last thing. Who is doing the server bit for Tentacle?
Who is doing what?
The kicking the release off. I mean, works like introduction of the server _ Tentacle feature bit. For previous releases, Core was doing this, but I recall one of previous CLTs that somebody else wanted to jump in. I'm entirely fine with this.
I had claimed that task, but apologies, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Fine, Patrick. If you want to kick Tentacle off, I'm more than happy to pass it. If not, I will do.
Sure, I'm gonna try to do it just because I'd like to learn how, but I'll probably ping you several times, Radek, to ask questions.
No worries. Cool. Thank you very much for this so prolonged session, and thank you, Nia, for letting it take so much time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Radit.